I received an email from Paul, and he is an avid runner and wanted to know what can he do to get faster. And no matter what your sport of choice is, what I'm about to share with you, you can apply to any sport that you're involved with. And I love these types of questions because being a physiologist for 38 years, I would say one of the biggest hurdles that athletes run into is they become mentally bored. And that boredom leads to staleness, and staleness causes you to lose some motivation to even get out the door and train. So getting incremental improvements need to be fun as well as challenging. And that's what I wanted to share with you here today. When we're looking at a workout, there's going to be three workout types that I think you can benefit the most from in the shortest amount of time. First and foremost, make sure that you're training with a heart rate monitor. I personally use the Garmin platform because of the ease of use, and I also love the metrics that it produces. It looks at both the activity as well as sleep, and it's the best platform I've ever seen on being able to quantify both the work and the rest side. That's going to be a very important component of this. When we get into the actual workout itself, stop and think about when you're out there racing, have you familiarized yourself with the intensity? Not perception, and this is where I disagree with a lot of other physiologists where they say on race day just go off your gut. Yes, there is some merit to the idea that at a very mature, an athlete that's been racing for a long period of time, they know their body pretty well. I say why run the risk of screwing it up? So when you're training with a heart rate monitor, first and foremost, we're going to want you to have your heart rate zones based on your current level of fitness. If you look in the description box right there in the resource area, you can gain access to our heart rate spreadsheet. No cost, please utilize it. When you determine what your max heart rate is for each form of training that you're doing, now we can get into the three workouts that I enjoy doing. I think they're fun, and I do find them to be challenging. When you go out and you do a workout that we refer to as a heart rate ladder, what a heart rate ladder allows you to do is, let's say that you're going to race, and I'm using very loose numbers just for the sake of illustration. Let's say that your race intensity is 165 to 175. Well, you can go out and you could do a timed block, let's say 20 or 30 minutes, where what you're doing is you're accelerating till you hit that top number. And when you hit that top number without walking, you slow yourself back down. Obviously, you're running. If you're on a bicycle, you hit the top heart rate number without stopping, you slow yourself back down to the lower end of that range. But it's a heart rate range zone 3. You've got to know what the lower and the upper number is, and it's imperative that those numbers are accurate to the discipline that you're doing. The more load you put on the muscle, the higher the heart rate. So come back to the heart rate ladder. You do a 10 or a 15-minute warm-up. You start to pick, you're not sprinting, you just pick up the intensity. You get yourself to that upper range. You start to familiarize yourself. Man, I'm breathing hard. I'm working hard. That's okay. That's why it's called a workout. But it's a very productive workout because for that next 30 minutes, you're toggling back and forth. Now, here's something that's really important to keep in mind with a heart rate ladder. If you're in really good shape, you may find that it takes longer and longer and longer for the heart rate to get elevated. And then when you do hit that upper range and you go to quote unquote recover, you may see that the recovery time is really short. That's one of the frustrations about being fit, is it takes longer and longer for the heart rate to get elevated, but you recover extremely quickly. So in a 30-minute heart rate ladder, you may find yourself or feel like you're doing a lot more work and a lot less recovery. That's kind of the double-edged sword about being fit. If you're someone that's not in really good shape, and that's why you're training to get fitter and be a better athlete, you may find that the heart rate elevates extremely quickly and then takes a longer time to recover. That's just because of your lack of a cardiovascular system. So heart rate ladders are very mentally challenging as much as the physical, because sometimes we don't like the numbers that we see. One other element associated with a heart rate ladder is, let's say you do a warm-up, you do your 30 minutes of heart rate ladder, give yourself a transition of say 10 minutes, and then do another 30-minute block. You may find, due to associated fatigue elements like dehydration, electrolyte depletion, sugar levels are starting to drop, you may find the second block's a little bit harder. Understand why it's harder. If the body doesn't have what it needs, water, electrolyte, and sugar, the workout's going to be deemed harder by you mentally. See what I was saying earlier? I want it to challenge you both physically and mentally, but you got to understand what makes a workout difficult. And that's one of the elements associated with a heart rate ladder. Another one that you can do is a negative split. So let's say that you're using a run, for example. You could say a bike, a run, a swim, whatever you want to do for cross training. Let the second half of the interval block be faster than the first half. Now again, I use everything off of a heart rate monitor. So let's say that I'm going to do a heart rate range of 170 to 180. So what I'll do is for the first, I know I'm throwing a bunch of numbers out there, write them down if it helps. If I'm going to do a run of 4 miles, I'm going to run the first 5 miles at that 160 to 165. I'm going to run the second 5 miles 165 to 170. Now you can do it on time as well, but you got to remember when it comes to race day, if your body is performing at a level that's above what you've trained it to do, your body is going to retaliate. It's what we call the familiarity principle. That's why these types of workouts are so incredibly productive. So stop and think about this. You go out for the first 2 miles of a 4-mile run, you warmed up, you're doing a 2-mile block and you're doing an out and back. You just want to come back 5 to 10 seconds faster than you went out. Now, unfortunately for you parents, you may have young athletes that sandbag the first one so that they can say they ran faster on the way back. That's where you have to start working with your athlete. So you challenge yourself without crossing that threshold and blowing up for the first 2 miles, and then come back slightly faster. On race day, I don't care what your sport is, it always behooves you to finish stronger than you started. It takes a lot of self-discipline, especially when our egos get involved. And then the third one I want to leave you with is what we call pacing blocks. So for example, let's say that you're taking a 6-mile run, you warm up for 1 mile, you do a mile at a certain pace. I use intensity always, but usually intensity matches pacing when you've got all variables, sugar, electrolyte, and water. Obviously we're factoring in heat and humidity, but hopefully you're training at the same times that you're going to be racing, so that way you can make sure, and not always, but when you're talking race day simulation, it needs to make sense. So now you go out there and you do pacing blocks. So I'm going to run a mile at 150 to 160. I'm going to run 1 mile 160 to 170. I'm going to run the next mile 170 to 175, and then have the 4th mile be 175 to 180. Those are pacing blocks based off intensity. So I know my duration, 4 miles. I know my intensity for each sequential block, and then I do a nice recovery and a cool down. I reap all the benefits of a cool down. So stop and think about that. See how fun and yet challenging you can make heart rate training? Negative splits, heart rate ladders, pacing blocks, whatever it may be. But the most important part is I want you to have fun training. And I'm going to leave you with that thought. If you're not having fun, please rethink why you're doing the exercises that you're doing. If every time you go out the door you're smashing yourself, your body's going to build a resentment up. It's not a threat, it's a physiological fact. You're only human. So keep that in mind, and let's go have some fun. If you happen to have a question, I don't care what the subject may be, if you have a frustration, something you need clarification on, here on Coach Robb Beam's YouTube channel, every day we're answering a question, so please subscribe and turn on the notifications. If you have a question, send it to me, contact@coachrobb.com. Me and my team will research it. We'll get a video put together and make sure that we answer your question. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day today, and we look forward to seeing you again tomorrow.